It's 9:32 p.m. on Friday, October 17, 2025. In a nondescript office building in downtown Baltimore, FBI Assistant Director Sarah Chen presses the transmit button on her encrypted radio. Her voice is calm, measured, carrying the weight of 18 months of preparation compressed into 4 syllables. All units move in now. 3 miles away, in the Fells Point neighborhood, a 24-year-old MS-13 member named Carlos Mendez checks his phone one last time. The encrypted message is simple. Green light. Execute. He doesn't know that every word he's read for the past 6 months has been simultaneously delivered to FBI headquarters in Quantico. He doesn't know that the secure messaging app his organization trusts was designed, deployed, and monitored by federal cyber operations from day one. He slides a Glock 19 into his waistband, climbs into a stolen Honda Civic, and drives toward what he believes will be MS-13's greatest victory. Instead, he's driving into the most comprehensive law enforcement trap ever set in Maryland history. At that exact moment, 340 federal and state law enforcement officers begin moving from their positions. They've been waiting for hours, some for days. They know the names of all 142 targets. They know the locations of 9 weapons caches. They have aerial surveillance, thermal imaging, and real-time GPS tracking on 17 vehicles. What follows in the next 5 hours will become the FBI's textbook case study on how to dismantle an entire criminal infrastructure in a single coordinated strike. No law enforcement casualties, no civilian injuries, 142 arrests, and the complete destruction of MS-13's East Coast Operational Command. Sarah Chen was born in San Francisco in 1979, the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants who ran a small electronics repair shop in the Sunset District. Her father taught her to solve problems methodically, take things apart, understand how they work, fix what's broken. Her mother taught her patience. Both lessons would define her career. She graduated from UC Berkeley with degrees in computer science and criminology, joined the FBI in 2002, and quickly distinguished herself in cyber operations. While other agents were learning to navigate basic digital forensics, Chen was developing predictive algorithms that could identify criminal networks before they fully formed. By 2010, she was running the Baltimore field office's cyber division. By 2018, she was assistant director, overseeing all organized crime investigations in the Mid-Atlantic region. Her colleagues describe her with consistent words: meticulous, patient, relentless. Sarah doesn't just want to arrest criminals, one former partner told me. She wants to understand them completely. She'll spend months building a profile when other agents would have already made the bust. That patience, inherited from her mother, refined through 15 years of investigation work, is what made Operation Silent Harbor possible. The operation began in March 2024, when a confidential informant mentioned that MS-13 was developing its own encrypted communication system. Most agencies would have simply tried to crack it. Chen saw something different, an opportunity. If they're building their own system, she told her team, they trust it absolutely. If we can access it without them knowing, we don't just intercept messages, we become invisible observers of their entire operation. It took 4 months to identify the app developer, a 26-year-old computer science dropout from Virginia named Michael Torres. Torres had no criminal record, no gang affiliation. He was just a freelance coder who thought he was building a secure messaging platform for privacy-conscious business people. When FBI agents arrived at his apartment in Arlington at 6 a.m. on July 12, 2024, he cooperated immediately. Within 72 hours, FBI cyber operations had complete back-end access to the app. Every message, every photo, every location ping, all flowing directly to Chen's team. The ethical calculation was complex. Under normal circumstances, the FBI would have shut down the app and arrested the developer. But Chen argued for something unprecedented. Let it continue operating, but under complete surveillance. We can arrest 50 gang members today, she told her supervisors at Quantico. Or we can wait 6 months and arrest 500. The decision went up to the deputy director. Authorization came back 48 hours later, approved but with strict oversight protocols. Chen had her window. By September 2024, 847 MS-13 members across 7 states were using the app daily. Chen's team watched everything. They documented weapons purchases, tracked drug shipments, mapped organizational hierarchies. They identified safe houses in 12 cities. They cataloged every violent crime being planned, every territorial dispute, every internal power struggle. The data was staggering. Over 40,000 messages per week, 2,100 photographs, 380 videos. FBI analysts worked in rotating shifts, building what Chen called the most complete picture of gang operations ever assembled in American law enforcement history. But Chen wasn't just collecting intelligence, she was waiting for something specific, a moment when the entire organization would expose itself simultaneously. Gangs are cellular by nature, she explained to her team. They compartmentalize. Low-level members don't know what leadership is planning, but if you wait long enough, they eventually coordinate. And when they coordinate, they become vulnerable. That moment arrived on October 3, 2025, when MS-13's regional commander, a 34-year-old Salvadoran national named Victor Ramos, sent a message to his entire network. La noche final, 2 weeks, Baltimore, everyone. Chen read the message at 2:17 a.m. in her office. She'd been expecting something like this for months, but the scope still surprised her. MS-13 was planning to mobilize 142 members for a coordinated assault on 7 different territories across Baltimore. The objective was clear: eliminate rival gangs, establish absolute control over the city's drug distribution, and send a message that would resonate across the entire East Coast. It was ambitious, aggressive, and tactically sophisticated. It was also the perfect trap. "They're giving us everything," Chen told her deputy director in a secure call 90 minutes later. "Every participant, every location, every timeline. They're planning to hit 7 targets simultaneously. If we position correctly, we can take all of them in one night." The authorization process moved faster than any operation Chen had ever run. By October 7th, she had approval for a joint task force comprising FBI tactical units, ATF, Maryland State Police, and Baltimore PD's elite strategic response team. The operation was classified top secret. Only 37 people knew the full scope. Everyone else, including most FBI field agents, would be briefed on a need-to-know basis, and only hours before execution. For the next 2 weeks, Chen barely slept. She personally reviewed every tactical plan, every contingency protocol, every risk assessment. She brought in hostage negotiators, trauma surgeons, even urban warfare consultants from the Department of Defense. "This isn't just an arrest operation," she told her team during a midnight planning session on October 15th. "We're talking about 142 armed gang members moving through a major American city simultaneously. If we execute poorly, civilians die. If we execute perfectly, we end MS-13's East Coast operations permanently. There's no middle ground." By October 16th, 24 hours before the operation, Chen had 340 law enforcement officers positioned throughout Baltimore. Mobile command posts were established in 4 locations disguised as construction vehicles and delivery trucks. SWAT teams were housed in rented apartments and hotel rooms within 3 blocks of each target location. Maryland State Police had 3 helicopters on standby at Martin State Airport, equipped with thermal imaging and real-time video transmission. Trauma units at Johns Hopkins Hospital, University of Maryland Medical Center, and Sinai Hospital were quietly briefed to expect potential mass casualties. The final piece was the most delicate: 18 undercover agents embedded within Baltimore's criminal networks, positioned to provide real-time intelligence without blowing their covers. One of those agents, a 32-year-old former Marine named Marcus Webb, had spent 18 months rising through MS-13's ranks. He'd been recruited specifically for Operation Silent Harbor, had endured 6 months of specialized training, and had successfully positioned himself as a tactical coordinator within the organization. His intelligence was invaluable, but his position was precarious. One mistake, one suspicious question, and he'd be executed immediately. At 4 p.m. on October 17th, Chen gathered her command staff for the final briefing. 23 people sat in a conference room in the FBI's Baltimore field office, studying detailed tactical maps and synchronized timelines. "We have one objective," Chen said, standing at the head of the table. Arrest all 142 targets without firing a single shot if possible. I want overwhelming force, perfect coordination, and zero civilian casualties. This operation succeeds only if everyone goes home safely, including the suspects. It was an ambitious standard, perhaps unrealistic, but Chen believed it was achievable. She'd spent 18 months preparing for this night. She'd analyzed every variable, planned for every contingency, built redundancies into every system. At 9 p.m., she took her position in the primary mobile command post, a converted RV parked 3 blocks from the harbor district, and watched as the final pieces moved into position. At 9:32 p.m., when Victor Ramos sent the execution order to his entire network, Chen picked up her radio and gave the command that would end MS-13's East Coast operations forever. The day began normally for most of Baltimore's 585,000 residents. Friday morning traffic clogged I-95 and the Baltimore Beltway. Coffee shops in Federal Hill and Canton filled with the usual crowds. At Johns Hopkins University, students attended afternoon classes, unaware that 23 undercover FBI agents were simultaneously moving into position across the city. In the Fells Point neighborhood, Marcus Webb, known to MS-13 as Mateo Cruz, spent the afternoon at a bodega on Eastern Avenue, reviewing final logistics with 5 other gang members. They studied hand-drawn maps, discussed vehicle assignments, synchronized watches. To anyone observing casually, they looked like friends planning a night out. In reality, they were coordinating a segment of the largest gang operation Baltimore had ever seen. Webb played his role perfectly. He'd been doing it for 18 months, long enough that his cover identity felt more natural than his real name. Born in Detroit, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a Ford assembly plant, Webb had joined the Marines at 18 and served 2 tours in Afghanistan. After his discharge, the FBI recruited him specifically for deep cover operations. He had the background, the language skills, his mother was from El Salvador, and the psychological profile for extended undercover work. Marcus doesn't just pretend to be someone else, his training supervisor had written. He becomes them completely. But underneath the performance, Webb was exhausted. 18 months of maintaining a false identity, of committing to a criminal lifestyle, of witnessing violence he couldn't prevent without compromising his mission. It had taken a toll. He'd participated in drug deals, been present at gang meetings where murders were planned, watched people he'd befriended get arrested or killed. His FBI handlers required weekly psychological evaluations. The assessments showed elevated stress markers, but nothing that disqualified him from continuing. Still, Webb knew he was approaching his limit. Tonight would either end his mission successfully or end his life. There wasn't much middle ground. At 6:47 p.m., Webb received the preliminary alert. Stand by for green light. He responded with a simple acknowledgement, knowing that FBI analysts were reading the same message simultaneously. Around him, 5 MS-13 members checked their weapons, 2 Glock 19s, 1 Glock 17, 2 Smith & Wesson revolvers. Webb carried a Glock 19 that the FBI had modified with a tracking beacon and firing pin that would fail on the first trigger pull. If things went wrong, his weapon wouldn't fire. It was a safety measure, but it also meant he'd be defenseless if the operation collapsed. Across Baltimore, similar scenes were unfolding. In Cherry Hill, 12 MS-13 members gathered in a row house drinking beer and reviewing their target, a distribution house controlled by the Bloods. In Sandtown, Winchester, 8 gang members loaded into 2 vehicles, preparing to hit a rival's stash house. In Lexington Market, 17 members assembled with a more ambitious objective, taking control of the entire drug distribution network in West Baltimore. What none of them knew was that FBI surveillance teams were watching every location. Thermal imaging cameras tracked body heat signatures inside buildings. License plate readers cataloged every vehicle. Undercover agents positioned in nearby buildings provided visual confirmation of headcounts and weapons. At the mobile command post, Sarah Chen watched 12 different video feeds simultaneously, each showing a different gang assembly point. All units report status, Chen said into her radio at 8:15 p.m. 12 voices responded in sequence, each confirming their team was in position. All targets under surveillance, 0 complications. The coordination was flawless, the result of 2 weeks of intensive preparation and rehearsal. Every SWAT team had run simulations of their specific target location. Every sniper had pre-measured distances and wind conditions. Every negotiator had reviewed psychological profiles of key gang members. Nothing was improvised. Everything was calculated. At 8:47 p.m., Victor Ramos, the operations commander, sent a message to his network. Final check, report in. 142 gang members responded over the next 12 minutes. Each confirmation was simultaneously received by FBI analysts, who cross-referenced names against their master database. By 9:01 p.m., Chen had visual or electronic confirmation on 138 of the 142 targets. The 4 unaccounted individuals were quickly located through GPS tracking embedded in the messaging app. At 9:15 p.m., Ramos sent another message. Green light in 15 minutes. Execute on my command. Chen read the message and activated her emergency command channel. All units, this is command. We are 15 minutes from execution. Final weapons check. Confirm all civilians are clear of assault zones. Snipers report ready status. The responses came back within 90 seconds. Every team was ready. Every position was secure. Every contingency was planned. At Johns Hopkins Hospital, 4 trauma surgeons stood on standby in the emergency department, prepped for mass casualties that Chen desperately hoped wouldn't arrive. At Maryland State Police Headquarters, 3 helicopters warmed their engines, rotor blades beginning their slow rotation. In 12 different locations across Baltimore, 340 law enforcement officers checked their weapons, adjusted their body armor, and prepared to execute the most ambitious gang takedown in Maryland history. At 9:28 p.m., Marcus Webb checked his phone one final time. The message was simple. Go time. Make us proud. He looked around at the 5 gang members preparing to leave the bodega. These were men he'd spent 18 months befriending. He knew their families, their histories, their fears. In another context, under different circumstances, some of them might have been redeemable. But tonight they were armed criminals preparing to commit violence, and Webb's job was to ensure they were arrested before anyone got hurt. At 9:31 p.m., Victor Ramos sent the final message. Execute now. At 9:32 p.m., Sarah Chen gave the order that would change everything. All units move in now. The first arrest happened in Fells Point at 9:17 p.m., exactly 17 seconds after Chen's command. A 6-man FBI tactical team breached the bodega, where Marcus Webb and 5 MS-13 members had gathered. They used a distraction device, a flashbang grenade that produces 170 decibels of sound and 7 million candela of light, to disorient the occupants. Webb, who'd been warned by his handler exactly 3 seconds before breach, closed his eyes and covered his ears. The 5 MS-13 members weren't so fortunate. The tactical entry was textbook perfect. First agent through the door moved left, second agent right, third and fourth agent center, fifth and sixth agents secured the rear exit. Total time from breach to complete room control, 4.3 seconds. The 5 gang members were on the ground, flex-cuffed, and secured before they fully understood what was happening. Webb played his role, shouted in Spanish, struggled briefly, allowed himself to be restrained. His handler would extract him from custody within 90 minutes, but for now, he had to maintain his cover completely. 3 blocks away, another team hit a row house in Canton. 8 MS-13 members were watching television, weapons on a coffee table waiting for their designated time to move out. The tactical team used a battering ram on the front door. 1 strike, 2,500 pounds of force. The door frame splintered instantly. Simultaneously, a second team entered through the rear. The 8 gang members found themselves surrounded in under 6 seconds. 2 reached for weapons. "Don't do it!" the lead FBI agent shouted. "Hands visible!" Hands visible now. 7 complied immediately. The 8th, a 19-year-old from El Salvador named Jose Castellanos, grabbed a Glock 19 from the coffee table. He didn't aim it, didn't threaten anyone, just held it. 3 FBI agents had him in their sights simultaneously, red laser dots converging on his chest. "Drop it. Drop the weapon now." For 2.7 seconds, an eternity in tactical time, Castellanos held the weapon. Then he dropped it, raised his hands, and began crying. He was arrested without injury. Across Baltimore, similar scenes unfolded in rapid succession. In Cherry Hill, 12 gang members were apprehended outside their target location before they even left their vehicles. In Sandtown, Winchester, 8 members surrendered immediately when confronted with an overwhelming show of force. 16 federal agents in full tactical gear, 4 armored vehicles, 2 police helicopters overhead with searchlights illuminating the entire block. In Lexington Market, 17 members were arrested in what witnesses later described as like a military operation. Absolutely overwhelming, incredibly fast, nobody had a chance to resist. But not every arrest went smoothly. At a warehouse in South Baltimore, 23 MS-13 members had gathered for what they believed would be the operation's largest strike, taking control of a major distribution hub. The FBI's intelligence was perfect. They knew the exact building, the number of occupants, the weapons inventory. What they didn't know was that 3 gang members had arrived early and positioned themselves as lookouts on the warehouse roof. At 9:34 p.m., when FBI tactical vehicles approached the warehouse, one of the rooftop lookouts, a 27-year-old named Ricardo Flores, saw them coming. He shouted a warning into his radio. "Federal, we're hit. Federal agents incoming." Inside the warehouse, 23 gang members made a collective decision that would determine whether Operation Silent Harbor became a historic success or a tragic disaster. They chose to barricade themselves inside rather than surrender. At the mobile command post, Sarah Chen watched the situation develop on 3 different video feeds. "Team 5, what's your status?" she asked calmly. "Command, this is Team 5 leader," a voice responded. "Suspects have barricaded inside the warehouse. We count 23 individuals, multiple weapons visible through thermal imaging. No shots fired. Requesting hostage negotiation team and permission to establish perimeter." Chen made the decision in under 3 seconds. "Team 5, establish hard perimeter. No one enters or exits that building. Deploy negotiators. I want communication established in 5 minutes. All other teams continue standard protocols. Do not modify your approach based on this development." This was the moment Chen had planned for, the scenario where some suspects chose resistance over surrender. Her contingency protocols were explicit: contain, negotiate, de-escalate. The objective wasn't to storm the warehouse, it was to wait them out. Time was on the FBI's side. The gang members had no food, limited water, and no realistic escape route. Eventually, they would surrender. But while Team 5 established their perimeter around the warehouse, 10 other teams continued executing arrests across Baltimore. By 9:47 p.m., 15 minutes after Chen's initial command, 119 of the 142 targeted MS-13 members were in custody. 23 remained barricaded in the South Baltimore warehouse. The final 3 were unaccounted for, their last known GPS positions showing them in vehicles moving through the city. Chen activated her citywide radio channel. "All units, we have 119 in custody, 23 barricaded at location 5, 3 mobile suspects unaccounted for. Air units, locate and track the 3 mobile targets. Ground units, prepare for coordinated intercept. I want those final 3 in custody within 30 minutes. Maryland State Police helicopters lifted off from Martin State Airport at 9:49 p.m. Using the GPS data from the gang's messaging app, they quickly located 2 of the 3 missing vehicles. One heading south on I-95 toward Washington, D.C., another moving west on Route 40 toward Frederick. Maryland State Police Patrol units, coordinated by FBI dispatch, moved to intercept. Both vehicles were stopped using coordinated roadblocks, the occupants arrested without incident by 10:12 p.m. The final suspect, Victor Ramos, the operations commander, proved more difficult to locate. His phone had gone dark at 9:36 p.m., 4 minutes after Chen's order to move in. His last known position was in downtown Baltimore, but he wasn't at any of the expected locations. Chen pulled up his profile on her command laptop. Ramos was 34 years old, born in El Salvador, entered the United States illegally in 2009, arrested twice for assault but never convicted. He'd risen through MS-13's ranks through intelligence and ruthlessness. FBI analysts considered him one of the most dangerous gang commanders on the East Coast. He wouldn't surrender easily. "Pull his full communication history," Chen ordered her intelligence team. "Last 6 months. Who does he talk to most frequently? Where does he go when he's not conducting gang business? Find me his patterns. Before we continue, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city and state in the comments. This story happened in Baltimore, but the dynamics of gang violence, federal operations, and community safety affect cities across America. I want to know where this channel reaches, and I want to hear from you throughout this story. Inside the South Baltimore warehouse, 23 MS-13 members faced a choice that would determine whether they spent the next decade in federal prison or the next 30 years. Through the barricaded windows, they could see at least 40 federal agents positioned behind armored vehicles. Police helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights turning night into day. Every exit was covered. Every window had multiple weapons trained on it. Ricardo Flores, the lookout who'd first spotted the FBI approach, was trying to maintain control of an increasingly panicked group. "Stay calm," he shouted over the helicopter noise. "They can't come in without a warrant. We haven't done anything yet. They have no grounds to breach." His legal analysis was fundamentally wrong. The FBI had warrants for all 142 targets, including everyone inside the warehouse. But in that moment, his confidence provided enough stability to prevent complete chaos. 3 of the younger gang members wanted to surrender immediately. 4 others wanted to shoot their way out. The rest were paralyzed by indecision, caught between fear and loyalty, between self-preservation and gang identity. Flores made the decision for them. "We negotiate," he said. "We use this as leverage. They want us alive more than we want to be dead. That gives us power." Outside the warehouse, FBI hostage negotiator Patricia Morrison was setting up her equipment, a direct phone line into the warehouse, speakers, psychological profile documents on each suspect inside. Morrison was 52 years old, a 27-year FBI veteran who'd negotiated over 180 hostage and barricade situations. Her success rate was exceptional. In 180 negotiations, she'd resolved 177 peacefully. The 3 failures still haunted her: 1 suicide, 2 suspects killed by tactical teams when negotiations broke down. She didn't want a 4th failure. At 10:03 p.m., Morrison placed her first call to the warehouse's landline. It rang 14 times before someone answered. "Who is this?" a male voice asked in accented English. "My name is Patricia Morrison. I'm with the FBI. I'm here to help resolve this situation peacefully." "Who am I speaking with?" "You're speaking with someone who's surrounded by 22 armed men. That's who you're speaking with." Morrison made a note. 23 total, 1 leader, defensive posture but not immediately hostile. "I understand you're in a difficult position," she said calmly. "Can you tell me your name?" "My name doesn't matter. What matters is you have 40 agents surrounding this building and we have no intention of surrendering. I hear you, and I respect that you're making decisions under enormous pressure. But I need you to understand something. Right now, everyone inside that building is safe. Everyone outside is safe. Let's keep it that way. Can we agree on that?" 3 seconds of silence. Then, "What do you want?" "I want everyone to walk out of there safely. I want you to see your families again. I want to end this night with no one hurt. That's what I want. What do you want?" At the mobile command post, Sarah Chen listened to the conversation on speaker. She'd worked with Morrison on 6 previous operations. She trusted her completely, but she also knew that negotiations could take hours, sometimes days. The longer this situation persisted, the greater the risk of something going wrong. Chen pulled up the warehouse schematics on her laptop. The building was a former industrial facility, converted into a distribution warehouse in 2018. 2 floors, 12,000 square feet, minimal internal walls. Perfect for storage, terrible for defense. The gang members had barricaded the main entrances with furniture and equipment, but the windows remained vulnerable. If negotiations failed, tactical teams could breach from 4 different points simultaneously. Chen hoped it wouldn't come to that. "Give me a timeline," she said to her tactical commander. "If negotiations break down, we can execute breach in 90 seconds from your command. But it'll be messy. 23 suspects, multiple weapons, confined space. I can guarantee we'll control the situation, but I can't guarantee 0 casualties." Chen nodded. "Then we wait. Morrison has the lead. We don't move unless someone inside gets hurt or they start shooting. Back at the warehouse, Morrison was establishing rapport. Can you at least tell me what I should call you? She asked. Call me Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo, I appreciate that. Ricardo, I know you're in charge in there. Your people are looking to you for leadership. That's a huge responsibility. How are they doing? Is everyone okay? We're fine. Nobody's hurt. Nobody's going to get hurt unless you force us to do something stupid. Ricardo, I promise you, no one here wants to force you into anything. We just want to talk. Help me understand your situation. What would need to happen for everyone to walk out safely? For the next 90 minutes, Morrison and Ricardo Flores engaged in what crisis negotiation experts call the dance, a careful, methodical process of building trust, establishing communication, exploring options. Morrison made no demands. She asked questions, listened carefully, acknowledged Flores's concerns. She was patient, empathetic, non-threatening. Every word was calculated to reduce tension rather than increase it. Inside the warehouse, the dynamic was shifting. The initial adrenaline rush had faded, replaced by exhaustion and uncertainty. 3 of the younger gang members were sitting against a wall, heads down, clearly wanting to surrender, but afraid of appearing weak. 5 others remained at windows, weapons ready, watching the FBI positions outside. The rest sat in the center of the warehouse, smoking cigarettes, talking in low voices, waiting for leadership to make a decision. Flores knew his position was untenable. He'd bought time, established communication, prevented immediate violence. But he hadn't achieved anything strategic. The FBI wasn't negotiating terms. They were negotiating surrender. There was a difference. Flores understood that every minute he delayed was another minute for the FBI to gather intelligence, refine their tactical plans, bring in additional resources. Time wasn't on his side. At 11:47 p.m., Morrison made a calculated offer. Ricardo, I've been authorized to make you a proposal. If everyone inside walks out unarmed with hands visible, I can guarantee safe transport to federal holding facilities, immediate medical evaluation, and access to legal counsel within 2 hours. You have my word that no one will be harmed if you surrender peacefully. But I need a decision soon. My commanders are getting impatient, and I'm running out of reasons to keep them from making tactical decisions. Help me help you. Inside the warehouse, Flores looked at his 22 companions. Most avoided eye contact. They wanted out, but they wanted someone else to make the decision. Gang culture is built on hierarchy and loyalty. Surrender has to come from the top or it's betrayal. Flores made his decision at 11:52 p.m. We surrender. Give us 10 minutes to prepare. We'll come out front entrance one at a time, hands visible. No weapons. Morrison exhaled slowly. Thank you, Ricardo. That's the right decision. 10 minutes. Front entrance. One at a time. I'll be there personally to ensure everyone is treated with respect. At 12:02 a.m. on October 18th, 23 MS-13 members walked out of the South Baltimore warehouse with their hands raised. They were searched, flex-cuffed, and loaded into transport vehicles. No one was injured. No shots were fired. By 12:19 a.m., all 23 were in federal custody. That left one target unaccounted for, Victor Ramos. While Patricia Morrison was negotiating the warehouse surrender, FBI cyber analysts were tracking Victor Ramos through every digital footprint he'd left in the past 6 months. They'd pulled 3,847 messages he'd sent through the compromised app. They'd mapped his GPS locations from 186 different days. They'd identified 12 locations he visited regularly, 3 safe houses, 2 restaurants, 4 associates' residences, 2 automotive shops, and 1 surprising location, a community center in East Baltimore, where he volunteered twice a month teaching soccer to kids. That final detail caught Sarah Chen's attention. Pull his full profile on the community center, she ordered. Who runs it? What's his connection? Is it gang-related or genuine? The intelligence came back within minutes. The community center was run by a nonprofit organization focused on youth outreach in East Baltimore's most disadvantaged neighborhoods. Ramos had been volunteering there for 11 months, every first and third Saturday. The center's director, a woman named Maria Gonzalez, had been interviewed by FBI agents 3 months earlier, as part of Operation Silent Harbor's background investigation. She described Ramos as quiet, reliable, good with the kids. She had no knowledge of his gang affiliation. Chen studied the pattern. Every other location Ramos visited was gang-related: safe houses, associate meetings, business locations. But the community center was different. It was personal. And in Chen's experience, when hardened criminals had something personal in their lives, they often returned to it during crisis. "Dispatch units to the community center," Chen ordered. "Plainclothes surveillance only. No tactical gear, no marked vehicles. If he's there, I want confirmation before we move in." At 12:37 a.m., 2 FBI agents in an unmarked sedan pulled into the community center's parking lot. The building was dark, officially closed since 9 p.m. But through thermal imaging equipment, they detected a single heat signature inside the building, seated in what appeared to be the gymnasium. "Command, this is Surveillance Team 3. We have one individual inside the community center. Stationary position. Confirming identity before we proceed." The agents used a telephoto lens to capture images through the gymnasium windows. Facial recognition software confirmed identity in 18 seconds. Victor Ramos, sitting alone on a basketball court, head in hands. Sarah Chen made the tactical decision immediately. "Team 3, establish perimeter but do not approach. I'm coming to you." This one we handle differently. Chen arrived at the community center at 1:04 a.m. in an unmarked SUV with 2 agents. She approached the building alone, knocked on the front entrance door, and waited. 30 seconds later, the door opened. Victor Ramos stood in the doorway unarmed, looking exhausted. "I know who you are," he said quietly. "I've known for 3 weeks." Chen's expression didn't change, but internally she was recalculating everything. "You knew?" "I didn't know details. But I knew something was wrong. Messages were arriving too fast sometimes, like they were being read by multiple people simultaneously. I'm not stupid. I know how technology works." He paused. "I knew, but I couldn't stop it. The organization had too much momentum. If I'd tried to shut it down, they would have killed me and found someone else to lead. So I let it happen." "Why are you here?" Chen asked. "Because this is the only place I've been in 3 years that felt honest. Everything else is lies and violence and pretending to be something I'm not. But here, teaching kids to play soccer, I was just Victor. Not a commander, not a criminal. Just a guy who likes soccer." He looked at Chen with surprising clarity. "I'm not asking for mercy. I know what I've done. I know what's waiting for me. I just wanted 1 hour somewhere that felt real before it ended." Chen studied him carefully. In 18 months of investigation, she'd built a comprehensive psychological profile of Victor Ramos. He was intelligent, strategic, capable of extreme violence when necessary, but he was also conflicted. Raised in El Salvador during the Civil War, immigrated to America seeking safety, got pulled into gang life through family connections and limited options. FBI analysts had flagged him as potentially redeemable under different circumstances. "Victor, I need you to come with me now. You'll be treated fairly, given access to legal counsel, processed through the federal system like everyone else arrested tonight. But you need to come voluntarily. Can you do that?" Ramos nodded. "Do I have time to lock the door? Maria trusts me with the keys. I don't want her to think I abandoned the place." It was a small request, almost absurd given the context. But Chen understood what he was asking. Permission to maintain one shred of dignity, to honor one final responsibility before his life changed permanently. "Go ahead. Lock the door." Ramos stepped back inside, turned off the lights, locked the entrance door, and handed the keys to Chen. "Give these to Maria. Tell her I'm sorry." He was arrested without incident at 1:11 a.m., completing the final piece of Operation Silent Harbor. 142 MS-13 members in federal custody. 0 law enforcement casualties. 0 civilian injuries. And one of the most successful gang operations in FBI history concluded in 5 hours and 39 minutes. The arrests were just the beginning. By 2 a.m. on October 18th, all 142 suspects were distributed across 3 federal holding facilities in Maryland. They were processed individually, photographed, fingerprinted, medically evaluated, read their rights, given access to phone calls and legal counsel. The operation shifted from tactical to procedural, from adrenaline to paperwork. But for Sarah Chen, the work was far from over. Each of the 142 arrests needed to be legally bulletproof. Each piece of evidence needed to be documented and preserved. Each interrogation needed to be conducted properly, with full Miranda protections and legal oversight. She'd spent 18 months building this case, but if the prosecution wasn't handled perfectly, defense attorneys would find grounds for dismissal. Chen returned to FBI headquarters at 3:17 a.m. and convened her command staff. 15 people gathered in a secure conference room, exhausted, caffeinated, still processing what they'd accomplished. "Outstanding work tonight," Chen began. "Every team executed flawlessly. But now comes the harder part, building cases that will hold up in federal court. I need every piece of evidence cataloged and verified. I need every interrogation documented. I need timeline reports from every team leader by noon today. We have 142 suspects in custody, which means we potentially have 142 federal trials to prepare for. Let's make sure we're ready." The legal challenges were substantial. MS-13 operated under a strict code of silence. Gang members rarely cooperated with law enforcement, even when facing decades in prison. But Chen had one significant advantage: the intercepted communications from the compromised messaging app. For 6 months, MS-13 members had been essentially documenting their own crimes in writing. Every drug deal, every violent act, every conspiracy had been recorded and preserved. At 8 a.m., the U.S. Attorney for Maryland held a press conference announcing Operation Silent Harbor's success. She outlined the scope of the operation, the number of arrests, the charges being filed. "This represents the most significant disruption of MS-13 operations in Maryland's history," she told reporters. "Thanks to the extraordinary work of the FBI and our law enforcement partners, 142 dangerous criminals are off the streets. We will prosecute these cases vigorously, and we will seek maximum sentences for those convicted." The media coverage was extensive. Major news networks ran the story nationally. Local Baltimore stations provided hour-by-hour updates. The narrative was consistent. Law enforcement had achieved a historic victory against gang violence. But Chen knew the reality was more complex. MS-13 wasn't destroyed. It was disrupted. The organization had operational cells in 15 states and dozens of cities. Removing 142 members would create a temporary vacuum. But unless that vacuum was filled with legitimate economic opportunities and community support, new criminals would simply rise to replace those arrested. Over the next 3 weeks, federal prosecutors began building individual cases against each of the 142 suspects. The charges varied based on each person's role in the organization: conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, weapons violations, racketeering, assault, attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just the intercepted communications, but also surveillance footage, witness testimony, forensic evidence, and in some cases, confessions. Marcus Webb, the undercover agent who'd spent 18 months embedded in MS-13, was quietly extracted from custody and relocated to a safe house in Virginia. His identity would remain classified indefinitely. His testimony would be crucial in dozens of trials, but his safety required permanent anonymity. The FBI set him up with a new identity, new documentation, new background. For all practical purposes, Mateo Cruz died the night of October 17th, and Marcus Webb ceased to exist publicly. Webb's psychological evaluation after the operation showed significant trauma markers, expected given his 18 months of deep cover work. The FBI provided comprehensive mental health support, including PTSD treatment and transition counseling. "Coming back from that deep is incredibly difficult," his handler told me. Marcus lived as someone else for so long that reintegrating his true identity required months of therapy. He saved lives that night, but it cost him a piece of himself. The legal battle began in federal court on November 14, 2025, when the first group of MS-13 members faced arraignment. 23 suspects, the warehouse group who'd surrendered peacefully, appeared before U.S. Magistrate Judge Andrea Wilson. All 23 pleaded not guilty. Bail was denied for all based on flight risk and danger to the community. Defense attorneys immediately challenged the evidence, arguing that the FBI's access to the encrypted messaging app constituted illegal surveillance. They filed motions to suppress all communications obtained through the app, arguing that the FBI had essentially operated a wiretap without proper judicial oversight. The legal arguments were complex and would take months to resolve fully. But the government's position was strong. The app developer had voluntarily cooperated with the FBI, granting them access to back-end systems. Users had no reasonable expectation of privacy because they were using technology that was compromised from its inception. It wasn't a wiretap. It was criminals voluntarily documenting their crimes and transmitting that documentation to law enforcement. Federal judges heard these arguments in multiple hearings throughout November and December 2025. The precedent-setting nature of the case attracted national attention from civil liberties organizations, legal scholars, and technology experts. The central question: if a criminal organization develops its own encrypted communication system, can law enforcement compromise that system and use the resulting intelligence in court? On January 22, 2026, U.S. District Judge Thomas Brennan issued a comprehensive ruling that would define the legal framework. The defendants voluntarily adopted a technology platform for criminal communications. The fact that this platform was compromised by law enforcement does not negate the defendant's choice to use it. Just as criminals who send incriminating letters through the Postal Service cannot later claim those letters should be suppressed if intercepted, these defendants cannot claim protection for communications they voluntarily transmitted through a system that was unknown to them, monitored by federal agents. The evidence is admissible. The ruling was a decisive victory for the prosecution. With the intercepted communications admissible as evidence, the government's cases against all 142 defendants became significantly stronger. Defense attorneys shifted strategy from suppression to plea negotiations. Over the following months, most defendants accepted plea agreements rather than risk trial. The terms varied based on individual circumstances: cooperation with ongoing investigations, testimony against higher-level gang members, acknowledgement of guilt in exchange for reduced sentences. By June 2026, 119 of the 142 defendants had pleaded guilty. The remaining 23, including Victor Ramos, chose to go to trial. Their cases proceeded throughout 2026 and into 2027, each presenting unique legal and factual challenges. Ramos's trial began on March 3, 2027 in U.S. District Court in Baltimore. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: 847 intercepted messages showing his leadership role, testimony from Marcus Webb detailing his operational control, forensic evidence linking him to multiple crimes. But Ramos's defense attorney presented something unexpected: evidence of his genuine efforts at community engagement. Maria Gonzalez, the community center director, testified that Ramos had been a dedicated volunteer, that he'd shown genuine care for the kids he coached, that he'd expressed desire to leave gang life, but felt trapped by circumstances and threats. Character witnesses described a man trying to find redemption while embedded in an organization that offered no easy exit. The prosecution didn't dispute these facts. Victor Ramos may have wanted to be a better person, the assistant U.S. attorney argued in closing statements. But wanting to be better doesn't erase responsibility for criminal actions. He commanded an operation that put hundreds of lives at risk. He oversaw drug distribution that destroyed communities. He ordered acts of violence. His good intentions at a community center don't absolve him of those crimes. The jury deliberated for 9 hours over 2 days. On March 18, 2027, they returned a verdict: guilty on 14 counts, including racketeering, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and weapons violations. Sentencing was scheduled for May 2027. Stop here for a second. Victor Ramos presented the jury with a real moral complexity: a criminal who genuinely wanted to change but felt trapped by circumstances. The American justice system struggles with cases like this. Do we punish based on actions or intentions? Can redemption exist within criminal organizations, or is participation itself unforgivable? There's no easy answer. What would you do if you were on that jury? Think about it. Comment below. Let's have a real conversation about this. The immediate aftermath of Operation Silent Harbor created a complex ripple effect across Baltimore. With 142 MS-13 members in federal custody, A significant power vacuum emerged in the city's criminal networks. Other gangs, the Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, initially moved to fill that vacuum, leading to a brief spike in territorial violence during November 2025. Baltimore police documented 23 gang-related shootings in the 3 weeks following the operation, resulting in 7 deaths and 14 injuries. But law enforcement anticipated this response. The FBI, working with Baltimore PD and community organizations, implemented what they called Operation Stability, a comprehensive strategy to prevent the vacuum from being filled by equally violent organizations. The approach combined intensive police presence in high-risk neighborhoods, community outreach programs, economic development initiatives, and coordinated prosecution of anyone attempting to rebuild MS-13's operations. By January 2026, the violence had decreased significantly. Baltimore PD's statistics showed a 42% reduction in gang-related violence compared to the same period in 2024. The reduction wasn't permanent. Gang violence is deeply rooted in economic inequality, lack of opportunity, and systemic issues that can't be solved through arrests alone. But Operation Silent Harbor created a window of opportunity for intervention. Sarah Chen recognized this. In meetings with Baltimore city officials and community leaders throughout early 2026, she emphasized that law enforcement success had to be paired with community investment. "We arrested 142 people," she told a community forum in East Baltimore in February 2026. "But if we don't address the conditions that created those 142 criminals in the first place, we'll just be arresting 142 different people in 5 years. This has to be more than law enforcement. It has to be economic development, education, mental health services, job training, and genuine community support." The response from Baltimore's communities was mixed. Some residents praised the FBI's operation, grateful for the reduction in violence. Others were skeptical, pointing out that heavy-handed law enforcement approaches had historically damaged communities of color, leading to over-incarceration, family separation, and deepened distrust between police and residents. Chen took these criticisms seriously. She met with community activists, church leaders, social workers, and residents who'd been directly affected by gang violence. She listened to their concerns, acknowledged the legitimate critiques of law enforcement overreach, and worked to build relationships based on transparency and accountability. "I don't expect anyone to trust the FBI automatically," she said in one community meeting. "Trust has to be earned. But I can promise you this. Every person arrested in Operation Silent Harbor was arrested based on evidence of criminal activity, not because of their neighborhood or ethnicity. Every case will be prosecuted fairly, and we're committed to supporting community-based solutions alongside law enforcement approaches." The broader investigation into MS-13's operations continued long after the October arrests. FBI analysts spent months analyzing the 6 months of intercepted communications, identifying additional gang members, mapping criminal networks across multiple states, and building cases against MS-13's national leadership. By March 2026, the investigation had expanded to include gang operations in Virginia, North Carolina, Texas, California, and New York. Federal prosecutors filed racketeering charges against 17 MS-13 leaders who'd been coordinating operations nationally. The charges were based largely on evidence gathered through Operation Silent Harbor. The compromised messaging app had captured not just Baltimore operations, but national-level strategic planning. The investigation also revealed disturbing patterns of MS-13 recruitment. The gang had been actively targeting vulnerable teenagers in immigrant communities, particularly Central American youth who'd arrived in the United States unaccompanied or with limited family support. FBI analysts documented recruitment strategies that preyed on isolation, fear, and need for belonging. Classic gang recruitment tactics, but executed with sophisticated understanding of immigrant youth psychology. This discovery led to a secondary federal initiative, Operation Safe Pathway, a program designed to provide alternative support systems for at-risk immigrant youth. The program combined mentorship, legal support for immigration status, educational opportunities, and mental health services. It was small-scale initially, serving about 340 youth across Maryland and Virginia, but early results were promising. Of the first 340 participants, only 7 had any contact with gang activities during the program's first year, compared to projected rates of 30 to 40% without intervention. Sarah Chen was directly involved in developing Operation Safe Pathway. Arresting gang members is necessary, but it's reactive, she explained. If we can prevent kids from joining gangs in the first place, we address the problem at its root. That's smarter law enforcement, investing in prevention alongside prosecution. To understand Operation Silent Harbor's significance, you need to understand MS-13's history. The gang originated in Los Angeles in the 1980s, formed by Salvadoran immigrants fleeing civil war. Initially, it was a protection organization, young Salvadorans defending themselves against other established gangs. But it evolved rapidly into a criminal enterprise, developing sophisticated organizational structures and brutal enforcement tactics. By the early 2000s, MS-13 had spread across the United States, establishing operations in major cities and developing international connections with Central American criminal networks. The gang became known for extreme violence, public executions, machete attacks, targeted killings of rivals and witnesses. FBI estimates in 2025 suggested MS-13 had approximately 10,000 members across the United States and another 30,000 in Central America. Operation Silent Harbor represented a new approach to combating this organization. Traditional law enforcement strategies had focused on arresting street-level members, the visible criminals committing day-to-day violence. But this approach was ineffective because it never disrupted the organizational structure. Low-level members were easily replaced, and gang leadership remained intact. Chen's strategy was different. Target the entire operational network simultaneously. By compromising MS-13's communication system, the FBI gained access not just to street-level criminals, but to mid-level coordinators and strategic planners. Operation Silent Harbor arrested 142 people. But more importantly, it arrested the right 142 people, those who actually ran operations, not just the expendable street soldiers. This approach has broader implications for law enforcement strategy against organized crime. If gang operations can be monitored comprehensively through compromised technology, law enforcement can build cases that dismantle entire networks rather than arresting individuals piecemeal. It's more efficient, more strategic, and potentially more humane, reducing overall violence by ending criminal operations decisively, rather than perpetuating ongoing confrontations. But this approach also raises significant ethical and legal questions. Privacy advocates have expressed concern about law enforcement's ability to compromise communication platforms. While the courts upheld the FBI's tactics in Operation Silent Harbor, civil liberties organizations worry about precedent. If the FBI can compromise one messaging app used by criminals, what prevents them from compromising apps used by political activists, journalists, or ordinary citizens? Asked Electronic Frontier Foundation attorney David Chen in testimony before a Congressional Oversight Committee in April 2026. These are legitimate concerns that American society continues to grapple with. The balance between security and privacy, between effective law enforcement and constitutional protections, has no simple answer. Operation Silent Harbor was legally authorized, judicially reviewed, and executed with appropriate oversight. But it represents a capability that, in less scrupulous hands or under less rigorous oversight, could be abused. Sarah Chen acknowledged these tensions directly. "I understand the concerns about government surveillance," she said in a rare public interview in June 2026. "Those concerns are valid and important. What I can tell you is that Operation Silent Harbor had multiple layers of oversight: FBI internal review, Department of Justice authorization, judicial supervision, congressional notification. We followed every protocol precisely because we knew the legal and ethical stakes. Not every law enforcement agency operates that way, and that's a problem. We need stronger oversight mechanisms, clearer legal frameworks, and absolute accountability. Technology gives law enforcement powerful tools, but power without accountability is dangerous." By December 2027, 26 months after Operation Silent Harbor, the long-term consequences were becoming clearer. Of the 142 arrested suspects, all had been convicted or pleaded guilty. Sentences ranged from 8 years to life imprisonment, depending on individual roles and criminal histories. Victor Ramos received 32 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole after 23 years. MS-13's operations in Baltimore never fully recovered. The organization still existed. New members were recruited, low-level drug distribution continued, occasional violence occurred, but the sophisticated operational capacity that existed before October 2025 was gone. The FBI's dismantling of the leadership structure had lasting effects. Without experienced coordinators, MS-13's Baltimore operations became fragmented, disorganized, and significantly less dangerous. National statistics supported this assessment. FBI data from 2027 showed a 38% reduction in MS-13-related violent crime across the Mid-Atlantic region compared to 2024 levels. Drug distribution attributed to MS-13 in Baltimore decreased by 56%. Gang recruitment in immigrant communities dropped by 41%, partly due to Operation Silent Harbor's deterrent effect and partly due to Operation Safe Pathways intervention programs. But these successes came with costs, human costs that statistics don't fully capture. 142 people were incarcerated, many for decades. That means 142 families disrupted, children growing up without fathers, parents losing sons. Some of those incarcerated were violent criminals who genuinely threatened public safety. Others were young men who'd made terrible choices under difficult circumstances and might have been redeemable with different interventions. I spoke with Maria Gonzalez, the community center director, who'd known Victor Ramos as a volunteer, in November 2027. She was conflicted about Operation Silent Harbor's outcome. "I'm glad the violence decreased," she told me. "I'm glad the community is safer." But I knew Victor. I saw the person he was trying to become. He made terrible mistakes, committed serious crimes, and he has to face consequences for that. But 32 years? That's essentially a life sentence. He'll be 66 years old before he's eligible for parole. What does that accomplish? Does it make us safer? Or does it just satisfy our need for punishment? These are the questions American criminal justice wrestles with constantly. We want accountability for crimes. We want communities protected from violence. But we also believe in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility that people can change. Operation Silent Harbor achieved its law enforcement objectives completely. 142 dangerous criminals removed from the streets, a violent gang organization dismantled, communities made safer. But it didn't resolve the deeper questions about justice, punishment, and redemption. Sarah Chen retired from the FBI in August 2027 after 25 years of service. She'd achieved the goal she'd been pursuing for 18 months. Operation Silent Harbor was successful by every measurable standard. But in her retirement speech, delivered to FBI staff at the Baltimore field office, she expressed ambivalence about what they'd accomplished. "We did important work," she said. "We made Baltimore safer. We dismantled a criminal organization. We followed every law, every protocol, every ethical guideline, but we also incarcerated 142 human beings, many of whom were products of circumstances we didn't address. We arrested gang members, but we didn't eliminate the poverty, trauma, and lack of opportunity that creates gang members. That work continues, and it's harder than anything law enforcement does. It requires sustained investment, community partnership, political will, and patience. I hope we remember that law enforcement is only one piece of community safety. The other pieces, economic development, education, mental health services, youth programs, those are equally important, maybe more important in the long term. Marcus Webb, the undercover agent who'd spent 18 months embedded in MS-13, never returned to law enforcement work after Operation Silent Harbor. His psychological evaluation showed significant PTSD, depression, and identity dissociation, expected outcomes from extended deep cover operations. The FBI provided medical retirement, full benefits, and comprehensive mental health support. Webb relocated to Oregon under his new identity, enrolled in college to study social work, and began rebuilding a life disconnected from law enforcement. In a brief anonymous interview conducted through FBI intermediaries in early 2028, Webb reflected on his experience. I did what I was trained to do. I gathered intelligence that saved lives and put criminals in prison. But the cost was higher than I anticipated. I lost myself for 18 months. I became someone else so completely that coming back to who I really am has been incredibly difficult. I don't regret my service, but I wouldn't do it again. Some operations require sacrifices that aren't visible in the success statistics. I'm one of those sacrifices. Operation Silent Harbor represents both the potential and the limitations of modern law enforcement. The FBI's strategic patience, technological sophistication, and coordinated execution achieved objectives that would have been impossible 20 years ago. The ability to compromise MS-13's communication system and monitor criminal operations comprehensively for 6 months, gathering evidence, building cases, and then executing 142 simultaneous arrests with 0 casualties, demonstrates extraordinary law enforcement capability. But capability raises questions about application. The technology and tactics used in Operation Silent Harbor could be applied to other contexts: political activism, journalism, civil rights organizations. The legal framework that authorized surveillance of MS-13 could potentially authorize surveillance of less clearly criminal activities. This is the tension at the heart of 21st century law enforcement. Effective tools for combating genuine threats can also become tools for suppressing legitimate dissent if oversight fails. Dr. Amanda Richardson, a criminology professor at Georgetown University who studied Operation Silent Harbor extensively, argues that it represents a turning point in American law enforcement strategy. Silent Harbor showed that with sufficient technological access and strategic patience, law enforcement can dismantle criminal organizations more efficiently than traditional approaches, she said in a lecture in March 2028. But efficiency isn't the only value that matters. We also need to consider civil liberties, due process, proportionality of punishment, and long-term community impact. Silent Harbor succeeded on law enforcement metrics, but leaves unresolved questions about whether mass incarceration is the right response to gang violence, or whether we should be investing more heavily in prevention and intervention. The psychological dimension of Operation Silent Harbor is equally significant. Sarah Chen's 18-month investigation required extraordinary patience and discipline, waiting for the perfect moment to act, rather than making premature arrests. Marcus Webb's 18-month undercover operation required psychological resilience that came at tremendous personal cost. Patricia Morrison's negotiation with Ricardo Flores required empathy and communication skills that prevented a potential bloodbath. The operation's success wasn't just about technology and tactics, it was about human judgment, psychological understanding, and strategic thinking. For the 142 men arrested that night, Operation Silent Harbor represents a definitive end to one life trajectory and the beginning of another. Most will spend decades in federal prison. Some will find redemption through education, therapy, and personal transformation. Others will become hardened by incarceration, emerging more dangerous than when they entered. The American prison system struggles to balance punishment with rehabilitation, often achieving neither effectively. 3 years after Operation Silent Harbor, Baltimore continues to wrestle with gang violence, drug distribution, and the systemic inequalities that create criminal organizations. MS-13's presence is diminished but not eliminated. Other gangs have partially filled the vacuum. The fundamental conditions that produce gang recruitment, poverty, trauma, lack of opportunity, systemic racism, remain largely unchanged. But something else changed too. A demonstration that strategic, patient, well-executed law enforcement operations can achieve significant results without violence. 0 law enforcement casualties, 0 civilian injuries, 142 arrests executed in 5 hours. These outcomes weren't accidental. They resulted from meticulous planning, appropriate resources, skilled personnel, and leadership that prioritized safety alongside effectiveness. The final assessment of Operation Silent Harbor depends on what values we prioritize. If we measure success purely by law enforcement metrics, arrests made, criminal organizations disrupted, violence reduced, then Silent Harbor was an unqualified success. If we include broader social metrics, families disrupted, young men incarcerated for decades, communities still struggling with systemic inequality, then the picture becomes more complicated. Sarah Chen, now retired and working as a consultant on criminal justice reform, offered this reflection in a conversation in September 2028. Operation Silent Harbor achieved everything we set out to accomplish from a law enforcement perspective. But law enforcement can't solve all of society's problems. We removed 142 dangerous people from the streets, and that made Baltimore safer temporarily. But we didn't address why those 142 people became criminals in the first place. We didn't eliminate the poverty, the trauma, the lack of options that pushes young men toward gangs. That's not law enforcement's job. It's society's job. Until we address those root causes, we'll keep arresting gang members, and other gang members will keep emerging to replace them. We can win individual battles, but we're not winning the war. Winning the war requires different weapons: education, economic opportunity, mental health services, community investment. Those are harder to deploy and take longer to show results, but they're ultimately more important than anything law enforcement does. On October 17, 2028, exactly 3 years after Operation Silent Harbor, a small ceremony was held at FBI headquarters in Baltimore. 27 law enforcement officers who participated in the operation received commendations for exceptional service. Sarah Chen, though retired, attended and gave brief remarks. Marcus Webb, still living under his protected identity in Oregon, was honored in absentia. The ceremony lasted 45 minutes, received minimal media coverage, and was attended by about 60 people. That same day, Victor Ramos marked his 3rd year in federal prison at USP Hazleton in West Virginia. He works in the prison library, teaches GED preparation classes to other inmates, and coaches a recreational soccer team. He's applied for sentence reduction based on good behavior and participation in rehabilitation programs. His application will be reviewed in 2031. If approved, he might be released in his mid-50s instead of his mid-60s. If denied, he'll likely die in prison. Maria Gonzalez still runs the community center in East Baltimore. She continues youth soccer programs every Saturday. When asked if she ever thinks about Victor Ramos, she responds simply, "Every week. I wonder what he could have become if society had given him the support he needed before he made the choices that destroyed his life. I wonder if we failed him, or if he failed himself, or if those are even the right questions to ask." There are no simple answers to what Operation Silent Harbor means or what it accomplished beyond the immediate metrics. 142 criminals were arrested. Families were separated. Communities became temporarily safer. Young men lost decades of their lives to incarceration. An FBI agent sacrificed his psychological well-being. A career law enforcement officer questioned whether her life's work addressed root causes or merely symptoms. The final night, October 17, 2025, was both a historic law enforcement success and a reminder that arrests alone cannot solve the complex social, economic, and psychological factors that create criminal organizations. The 5 hours between 9:32 p.m. and 2:47 a.m. dismantled MS-13's Baltimore operations. The decades that followed demonstrated that dismantling a gang is far easier than dismantling the conditions that create gangs in the first place. That work continues. In Baltimore, in cities across America, in communities struggling with violence and inequality, the harder work persists, creating opportunities, providing support, addressing trauma, building systems that prevent young people from ever choosing gang life. Operation Silent Harbor proved that American law enforcement can execute sophisticated operations with extraordinary precision. Whether American society can execute the equally sophisticated social interventions necessary to prevent future gang generations remains an open question, one we're still struggling to answer.